Are you listening?
Hi! So I was going through my Goodreads and I realised I've read 24 books this year, which is crazy because this has literally been the busiest year of my life so far. That has to be a record. I don't think I've ever read that many books in a year. So in this video, I'll be counting down my top 10 books of 2014. My number 10 pick was The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. Prior to reading this book, I hadn't actually read any of Neil Gaiman's work before. I know, bad grace. I'd heard lots of good things about it, and it was the Kindle Daily Deal at the time that I bought it, so that was a big motivator to read it, but it was really good. If you like fantasy stories like Harry Potter, where there's magic that takes place in the real world, you'll like this book. Basically, the story is about this guy who is leaving a funeral and he decides to go back and visit the house where he grew up. While he's visiting, he remembers this weird event that happened when he was a child, so the story is basically him remembering this event that happened. So obviously if you like stories with magic, especially magic in a contemporary setting, you'll like this book. It was really interesting and really well written. At number 9 we've got Looking for Alaska by John Green. I love John Green's writing. Every story is different, but they're all really funny and heartbreaking and romantic. Looking for Alaska is really good because the main character, who's called Miles, has this obsession with famous last words. I also really like, not necessarily last words, but famous quotes and things like that, so I really like that about this book, and I appreciated all the literature references as well. Of course, there is also a sort of romance in it, which I always like. And there's a little bit of a mystery because it's written before and after. So you're thinking, ooh, what's the event that's going to happen? It's a really good read. I liked it a lot. I always love John Green's books. My number 8 was Where She Went by Gayle Forman. This is the sequel to If I Stay, which you probably know because the movie came out earlier this year. Personally, I like this one better than If I Stay, just because If I Stay was a little bit slower moving, and I feel like this one was a little bit more interesting. This one was also a little bit darker, because although in the first book she's pretty much a ghost and there's like a lot of death, I think this one was actually darker even though everybody was alive, because it was about depression and getting over breakups. I really like the ending to this as well. So if you like contemporary novels about relationships and things like that, you'll probably like this series, so I would recommend that. My number 7 is Attachments by Rowell. I just finished this one in the early hours of this morning and it was very good. Like John Green, Rowell's books are always really good. This one is set just before the millennium, and the main character in this book, Lincoln, is the IT guy that works at a newspaper. It's his job to make sure that the email system at the newspaper isn't being abused, but he starts reading the messages between two girls, Beth and Jennifer, and that we should report them because their emails are coming up on his system because they were flagged. He doesn't report them and basically he falls in love with one of them. It was very good, I liked it a lot. Not as much as Fangirl. This one sort of made me feel like really heavy-chested, which is a bit of a weird thing to say. I can't really describe it any other way. There were some funny bits, but there were also some kind of depressing bits. But the ending was really good and I did really like the story. If you like John Green, Rowell's work is quite similar to that. Or if you like Rowell's work, of course you'll like this too. If you haven't read either of those authors, you should still read this book because it is a contemporary novel and there's a little bit of romance, a little bit of sort of coming of age. It's very good, you should read it. Number 6 is The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. If you haven't heard about this book, where have you been for the last year? This book has been everywhere. Such a sad book, but a romantic book. Very, very good. Don't even need to talk about it. Look it up. My number 5 is Warm Bodies by Isaac Marion. Now, I know you're probably thinking, Grace, what are you doing reading a zombie book? But the truth is, I saw the film last year and I was like, I have to read this. It was so good! It was actually like the biggest genre cocktail story you've ever read. There was horror, there was romance, there was humour, there was science fiction, there was everything. It was so well written. When it talked about the cause of the zombie problem, it was very philosophical, and I actually really liked the love story. I think you could easily just read it as a one-off. That's what I did. Very much recommend it. Even if zombie things aren't really your cup of tea, I'd say read it. My number 4 was Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. Now I know I've already reviewed this on here, so I won't talk too much about it, but I couldn't stop reading this book. It was crazy, it was scary, but it was so good. At number 3, I have an audiobook called Delirium by Lauren Oliver. This book really took me by surprise. Someone recommended it to me a couple of years ago and kind of thought, sounds a bit cheesy. But then I heard a sample of it and it was actually really, really good. I really, really enjoyed it. Loads of twists and turns, great characters, and a really interesting concept, which I thought was really well written. I haven't read the rest of the series yet, but I would definitely recommend the first book. It even works as a standalone novel. So if you like dystopian novels, a little bit of romance or YA fiction, you'll probably like this book. Number 2 is Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. I preferred this one to Attachments because I feel like the characters were at a stage in their life that was more relatable to me. And I think it was just a bit easier to read. It was just sort of written with a better flow, I think. I also already did a video review of this, so if you want to know more about this, watch my review. Very, very, very good. And my number 1 book of the year is Divergent by Veronica Roth. Now this is another one that I was really pleasantly surprised with. A friend of mine read it, so I thought I would read it. You can read this as a standalone book. In fact, I really recommend that you just read this as a standalone book. Don't waste your time with the rest of the series because it just ruins it. You probably already know about this because the movie came out this year as well. It's another dystopian novel where society is split into factions. It's about this girl called Tris who doesn't fit into any of the factions, but she has to keep that a secret because it's actually really dangerous to be anything other than one specific thing in this society. It was a really fun read, really interesting, quite funny, bit of romance. Really, really, really love this one. So those are my top 10 books of the year. I would recommend any of them. Let me know what the best books you read this year are. I hope you have a lovely Christmas and a happy new year.